begins here. Local broadcasts of Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo, and by Carl Smith Ball, providing legal services throughout Hawaii and the Pacific since 1857, making a positive difference in the communities where we live and work. Artificial intelligence is making its way into the courtroom, sometimes with troubling results. Recently, lawyers have made headlines after citing cases that turned out to be completely fabricated by AI. How reliable is AI in the legal system, and what are the risks to fairness, accuracy, and justice? Also, what are the advantages? Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi. I'm Yanji Denise. Artificial intelligence is changing the way we work, and the legal system is not immune from the effects of this growing technology. AI can analyze, search, and consolidate data faster than ever before, but with the benefits come some new risks. Recently, some lawyers across the country have submitted briefs that included fictitious case citations generated by AI tools. So what are the consequences of expanding AI in our legal system, and can the law keep up with this rapidly evolving technology? We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaiʻi.org and on the PBS Hawaiʻi YouTube page. Now to our guests. Mahdi Belcaid is the Associate Chair in the Department of Information and Computer Sciences at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. He's the Executive Director of the Hawaii Data Science Institute and leads research on applying AI in civic technology. He helped to create a chatbot that helps Hawaii residents navigate the state's court system. John Tonaki is a circuit court judge in the First Circuit for the island of Oʻahu. He was appointed to the court in 2019 by Governor Ige. Prior to taking his seat, he served as the state public defender for 19 years. He sits on the Committee on Artificial Intelligence and the courts established in 2024. Ken Lawson is a faculty specialist at the William S. Richardson Law School, where he teaches criminal procedure, criminal law, and professional responsibility. He's the co-director of the Hawaii Innocence Project and had a successful practice in Cincinnati before relocating to Hawaii. And Jesse Souki is the former president of the Hawaii State Bar Association. He's practiced law for more than 20 years and currently serves as the Deputy Superintendent of Operations for the Hawaii State Department of Education. He also serves as a member of the Hawaii Supreme Court's Task Force on AI. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm so interested in our topic. I'm so glad you're all here. Judge, I want to start with you. Where are we seeing AI applied in our courts right now, and what are some of the guardrails for this?
Well, we recently had a bench bar conference, which is a meeting with the judges and lawyers. And when we took a show of hands in the committee and we asked how many are using AI, the majority of our group said that they're either experimenting with it or using AI in their practices. So we are seeing it. We don't always know when briefs and memoranda are submitted to us, whether they're a product of AI, but I think most lawyers are using it, so we are encountering AI. And there have been a few instances where judges have discovered false case sightings, otherwise known as hallucinations. And so we're handling those instances on a case-by-case basis.
Are there any rules for how this can or cannot be used?
Well, there's no rules that apply specifically to AI right now, but there are rules, ethical rules, which bound lawyers to, of course, be truthful with the court and, of course, not submit anything that is false or fictitious to the court in their briefings to the court. So that is a rule that we're using to regulate AI and if there are any misuses of AI. But I think it's having, it's not all negative. you only hear about the negative things when they're publicized, but I think it's helping lawyers, it's saving time, and it's especially helpful to those who cannot afford lawyers.
Are judges
self-represented litigants?
Are judges using AI in writing their opinions? Do you know?
I don't know of any judges that are using it to write opinions. I haven't talked to every judge in the state. I think there may be some that are using it for research.
Research, yeah.
I don't know if direct drafting. I myself am not.
That's because you're old school, man.
I'm old school, and I'm hesitant to do that.
Yeah.
Professor Lawson, let's get your take. You know, as someone who's interacting with law students, how is the law school navigating this, and how are you integrating this into what you're teaching first years and so on?
Well, I think when we're navigating it, our law students are allowed to use AI because it's going to be the future. I think for me, is letting the students know that you still have a duty, as the judge was saying, to be competent in what you're doing. And AI has a tendency can make some people just lazy, right? Because, I mean, why should I have to go do all this research, which is really boring to a certain extent, when I can get it done through AI? And what could happen is that it makes students and then future lawyers lazy in doing the research. And again, the rules of professional responsibility is there to protect the public. And so if you're my client, you know, do I have to tell you that I'm using AI? I think the rules should change. Yeah, you need your client's consent, because I can do in 15 minutes and then bill you for 5 hours. So if I want to draft a motion for you, and if, you know, AI prints out a 20-page motion in your case, well, I ain't making no money if I just bill you for 15 minutes. Right? But I can make a lot more money if I say this is 8 hours worth of work. And so I think, you know, what I'm trying to teach, and I think our school is trying to teach our students, is, you know, that duty to be competent, which means when you submit a paper to me in the Innocence Project or whatever, that you've actually made sure you've done your homework and made sure whatever AI is telling you is true. If it's a practicing lawyer, as a judge said, we had a couple of cases here in Hawaii where lawyers were using AI and they're spitting out fake cases. Did your client know you were doing this? How much did you charge your client for this? Because again, the rules are to protect the public. And so if lawyers are billing clients, you know, for 10 hours of work and AI just spit out 20 minutes, there's an issue there.
Yeah, that's an important point there about the Hawaii Rules of Professional Conduct. It was never okay to do 10 minutes of work and then bill for 5 hours. It was never okay. Double billing, that's not okay. Under the rules of professional conduct, you need to be honest about your billing with your clients. So if you're using AI as a tool, you know, you should be checking your work also. That's another important part of it. AI doesn't get it right sometimes, and the issue is sometimes it almost gets it right, and unless you understand the area of law and you know what to look for, you won't see it.
What do you think the difference is between using an AI tool and using, let's say, a paralegal or an assistant who might make a mistake, right? And so is there a qualitative difference to those two things?
In some ways, it's very similar, because an attorney is responsible for the work product that's produced by, you know, a paralegal or a secretary. You're ultimately responsible for the work product that leaves your office and ends up before the court. So that is true whether you're using human beings or you're using AI.
Yeah, but real quick, and I'm sorry, because I know we want to get him in here. But, you know, I ran a law firm, and so I would still check my paralegal's work. The comfort with AI can be that it's got it right. I don't need to check it. That's the reason why I got AI, right? So it's going to spit out the right information. So there may be a tendency for a lawyer to look at what AI spit out, because if you read it, it's extremely convincing. So I could see a lawyer that's pressed for time, or who has a huge caseload, and oh man, I got a motion due tomorrow. I totally forgot about it, right? Let's spit it in AI, and they don't have time to check it. So I do think the difference between a paralegal and AI is I would always check my paralegal's work because we know they're human. But some mindsets may be, AI's got it. you know.
That we might overtrust the technology. Let's bring your voice in here. And I know that the judge was saying that there could be a benefit to this. You've created a tool that folks in Hawaii can use to help to navigate some of the laws that surround us. Tell us a little bit about that and some of the upsides for this technology.
Yeah, so if you take courts alongside any government agency or large service providers in general, you see that the challenges are strikingly similar. You know, they all have to deal with massive volumes, with complex forms, with recurring questions, and most importantly, when we talk to businesses, they all have to deal with short staffing. And so there's this need to reserve expert time for important decisions, for high-stake decisions. So what we've seen being good sort of implementations for AI is in 3 different areas. One of them is in what we call the back office, so AI for cost efficiencies, improving operations, and that, in my opinion, is one of the sort of the lowest hanging fruits where AI can be applied in the courts to sort of automate the processes behind the scenes, check forms if they're missing fields, missing documents, turn forms into searchable texts, you know, even maybe flag procedural deadlines, right? And the second part is that sort of public access aspect. I don't know how many have sort of navigated the Hawaii State Judiciary, but it's a massive website. There is so much information, and it is sometimes hard to find the information that you're looking for. So when you put that chatbot that knows everything there is to know about the judiciary, it makes it so much easier to get the information very quickly and takes off the burden of the staff who have to answer these questions. And what we noticed, so we call it Kolo Kolo Chat, is it's a collaboration between the University of Hawaii and the Hawaii State Judiciary. It was deployed on May Day this year, and talking with the staff, they noticed that there was a change in the type of calls they're now receiving. They said that the calls are getting longer, and that is something that we're seeing elsewhere. You know, when you put these chatbots at the front end to answer the basic questions, the calls get longer, they get more complex, they get more nuanced, but they get more meaningful.
And less frequent, hopefully.
And less frequent.
Let's bring in a question from Eric, and Judge, I would love for you to take this one. Even before AI was a thing, if attorneys submitted briefs into the record in a court proceeding and there was fake information in them, would there not have been sanctions or consequences? Wouldn't that still be the case now if the source of the fake information was AI? Is there any kind of penalty if you produce a brief and it has a hallucination case in there?
Yes, there could be, and under the rules of professional responsibility, again, the attorney is responsible for submitting accurate information in their briefs. So courts have sanctioned attorneys here and on the mainland for submitting hallucinated information, and but again, that's on a case-by-case basis, and in I think all of the instances here, the attorney pretty much confessed to not adequately checking, and the court handled it accordingly. Now, the additional, it's not necessarily a sanction in and of itself, is if you submit a brief with not having checked the brief or submitting sloppy work and with fake citations, how do you think a judge is going to look at that, the argument by that party? So in addition to having this hallucinated information submitted, you may lose the motion or the case because the judge is not going to trust your judgment in the argument. So you may be costing, as Ken said, your client the case.
To his other question, is there anything stopping you from using AI other than your own, I mean, he called it old school, but other than your own moral compass or your own interest in doing the work yourself? Could a judge, under the current, legal framework, use AI to write opinions?
The judge could. There's no rule that prohibits a judge from using AI to author an opinion or ruling, but I wouldn't do it. And I don't know. of any judge that
Yeah.
that trusts AI that much to, if you're gonna affix your name to an opinion, to have AI just totally write that opinion. You may seek assistance in it, but you're gonna go over it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure everything is accurate.
And you know, as busy as our judges are, and I totally agree. I can see, and that AI can be a positive thing. I'm not saying all negative things about it, just like the judge said. I can see judges using it to formulate their opinion, their basis of it, and then giving it to their law clerks and make sure that the cases are cited and stuff like that. You know, I think it'll save a lot of time, and I really do think it's a useful tool. I just think, you know, to the judge's point, you know, we have to be competent. You know, attorneys have to have a duty to be competent to their clients. If you're turning in stuff that you haven't read with fake cases and stuff like that, you're not a competent lawyer. But on the sanction part, not only are you, one, it's going to ruin your credibility with the court and your credibility in the legal community, but two, the other side has to do a ton of work to show what you just put in there was some bull crap. You know what I mean? What you just submitted to the court don't exist. Right? It's a big lie. Now I got to do a whole bunch of work responding to your fake motion, right? Who's paying for that? Why does my client have to pay for you lying to a court and then me demonstrating to the court that you lied? So I think, you know, so you have two different things. You have ODC, Office of Disciplinary Counsel, that can sanction lawyers. Then you have the judge that's in front of this sitting over it, like the judge said, you know, and they can issue sanctions. But part of that should also be paying the attorney fees, right? There has to be consequences. If all I can do is come into the court and say, I'm sorry, I used AI and I should have looked it over, fine. But did your client know that you was doing this? This is the things I would want to know as a judge. Did your client know you were doing this? And I'm gonna order you to pay the attorney fees, where this other side had to spend all this time showing us that what you did was a lie.
You know, on that point of the opposing counsel's responsibility for an attorney using AI and getting it wrong, there was a case out of California in September, the appeals court. And the attorney in that case had relied on AI and a bunch of hallucinations, cases that didn't exist, and interpretations from cases that were wrong. The court found it out. That attorney was sanctioned $10,000. Opposing counsel asked for fines against and the court denied granting it, saying that opposing counsel should have been also looking for these cases being wrong.
Yeah.
That was an interesting outcome there.
Yeah.
Well, I want to get in some more questions here, and I would love for you, Jesse, to take this one. What happens if there's a verdict or a ruling in a case and it's determined later that the ruling was based on false information gathered via AI? In a criminal case, someone may be wrongly convicted. In a civil case, it could affect monetary damages awarded. Monica's saying here, this is scary.
Yeah, I think Professor would know all the things you can do in a criminal case. It's your area, but there's remedies you can seek if the court got it wrong based on wrong information, wrong cases. You could come back to the court and ask for some kind of remedy. But you know, that's a process, and in the meantime, people are suffering. So again, it's the attorney's responsibility, the court's responsibility to be sure that they get it right. You want to get it right.
Yeah, I mean, Professor, what are your thoughts on that? This idea that, you know, you could, you know, what she's asking is, could we end up convicting someone in a criminal case because we didn't check this information?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely can happen, but it goes back to Jesse's point earlier and the judge's point. You know, before that gets submitted, I think everybody has a duty to check the cases. But yeah, the possibility does exist. Yeah.
There's a question here from Gerald, and not that you're the full AI advocate, but we're putting you in that seat right here. Gerald and I says, now aside from the efficiency factor, what are the other advantages of using AI in the legal system as it improves? Would it be possible that it could find information that a human could miss? And
Definitely.
So there could be an upside to all of this.
Absolutely. I think the scale at which AI works is so much larger than the scale at which we can process information. So it definitely can find information that is just impossible, find that needle in the haystack. You know, one of the reasons I think lawyers are, you know, embracing AI and starting to use it more and more is because it can allow you to search through massive amounts of, you know, case law and regulations and statutes in seconds, right? Whether it does a good job or not, it's open to interpretation and depends on what kind of tools used to do that. So definitely, I think it could be a very, very powerful tool to essentially look for that needle in the haystack. I mean, you can look in discovery through massive amounts of documents, and it can flag that one point that is beneficial for your case. So definitely, I think there are a lot of benefits beyond just being able to sort of supercharge lawyers, essentially.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about the difference between using AI and the simple search tools that we're sort of used to, right? Because we're used to doing a word search, let's say, and then maybe if you're a paralegal going through this and you're doing discovery, you're looking for all these instances of a certain word or phrase. But how would AI be applied differently, and the efficiency that could add?
Yeah, maybe I'll step back a little bit and just mention that there's differences between what we suggest people use AI for and the tools they should use AI for. So essentially, the vast majority of lawyers that got caught submitting false legal briefs mostly use ChatGPT or some version of some chatbot, right? And a chatbot is a wonderful technology, but it's not a good solution, right? A good solution goes beyond the technology, and it focuses on how you deliver and how you package that technology. So you take, for example, when in hospitals, when doctors used to enter free-form prescriptions, pardon me, there were a lot of errors. Errors were very common. And then the process was repackaged. So instead of entering free-form prescriptions, they had to pick the patient, pick the drug, pick the dosage, check for allergies, and just very, very simple redesign completely, or I wouldn't say completely, but substantially reduced errors, right? And I think it's the same principle at play here. I think that lawyers and professionals in general don't want a chatbot. They want something that's integrated with their legal framework. And what a lot of companies, including these big legal tech players, realize that and have started sort of implementing AI in every step of that legal workflow, and so are a lot of startups. That's what they're pursuing. But to answer your questions, when a paralegal or an associate is going to do a search, typically, it's not going to just rely on keywords. It's going to look for the meaning of a sentence, the semantic value of that sentence. And what these tools do, they take massive amounts. We can analyze millions of documents in seconds if they're pre-processed. So what it does, it turns these massive volumes of documents into digital prints, into points in a very high dimensional space. So think of this, studio here with a bunch of points, and points that are close to each other represent something that's semantically related. And I take a point, I say, okay, what is the closest sort of sentence, what is the closest points to it? And that's what, other documents, other sentences, other mentions to my query. So it does not just use keywords, but uses this semantic meaning. So there is less of a pressure to formulate the perfect query. I could say something that's, vaguely similar to what I want to find, and it still can do a very good job and find it for me.
Wow.
So give me an example of that, because that kind of went over my head.
Yeah.
So like if I wanted to search all these discovery documents in a car accident case where the allegation is the person ran through a red light, was drinking and driving, and injured my client, and I want to see how many witnesses saw the incident, or what would I put into that search?
So you could put any keyword that is vaguely similar to what you want to search for. For example, do the reports or do the documents mention anyone standing at the scene, at the crime scene?
Okay. Right.
And it would know exactly what you're looking for. So the power of these language models is that they understand the specific meaning of a word based on its occurrence in a sentence. So for example, if I say, I stood by the bank of the river, it knows that I'm not talking about First Hawaiian Bank, right? Mm-hmm. And that is a huge difference when you're looking for keywords. It's going to look for First Hawaiian Bank, and it's going to give me all the banks and checking accounts and all of that, and that's not what I'm looking for. Right?
Okay.
Wow, that's very interesting. There's a question here from Evelyn. Jesse, I would love for you to take it. Where does the Bar Association stand on the use of AI? Has this tool been discussed? We did mention at the top that you and the judge are both on this committee that's from the state Supreme Court, but where do individual associations like the Bar Association stand on this tool?
So where On the committee, one of the things that the committee did at the Judiciary is we prepared a letter that sort of advises attorneys that the Justice Rechtenwald sent over to the bar, and the bar sent out to its members. And it basically touches on a lot of the things we're talking about, where we have an ethical duty that hasn't changed. We also have a duty to understand new technology and use it to the advantage of our clients. We need to verify citations in our work, and we need to use it carefully in the work we do. And so that letter was sent out to members. So I think everyone's on notice about this new technology now, but also the bar has CLEs, training, bringing people up to speed. It's a new technology. I remember when, I'm Generation X, but I remember when, using word processors was a big thing. Using your laptop in a classroom was a big thing. You looked in books in the library before that. So technology changes, but ethics, those principles don't change. And so we have to just be cognizant of and careful about how we use the tools. And I think that's the way the bar approaches it: training, guidance, information.
Is the committee you guys on the duty of confidentiality, right? So if I have her case or his case, right, and I uploaded the facts of the case into Chat GPT, which puts it out into a public domain, so to speak, are there any rules, are you guys talking about?
Insofar as we're looking at certain tools that can streamline court operations, that is a very big issue that we want to ensure. In other words, if we're going to employ some type of software or a tool that utilizes artificial intelligence, we want to be sure that the information that is placed into that tool will be secure. So it doesn't go out to the world, because, as you know, a lot of the information in court cases need to be, the confidentiality needs to be protected.
So that's a real concern. And what I'm hearing, some firms who use the technology from different articles and things I've read, is that you can set up these systems so that you're only looking at a universe of documents in your firm.
Okay.
So you're looking at all of your past briefs, you're looking at these cases, so you don't upload things into the cloud. And when practices are thinking about integrating AI into their office, or even other businesses and workflow, you need to read your contract very closely and be sure that the information you're using is not being used to train AI up in the cloud, that information remains confidential and within your office.
And do you, so would a law firm not only have to do that, but get the client's consent to use AI on their case, or?
I'm not sure how that works exactly with clients, but to your point, clients should know, if you're only using 10 minutes of your time to generate something, that you're going to be billed appropriately, right?
Yeah, I mean, that closed system point is a really good point, and I want to bring it back to the tool that you mentioned off the top, because if people are going to that to ask questions, you want to make sure that that is accurate. How did you do that?
Well, it's hard to tell if something is accurate. I know that there have been new tools that were released recently that use AI to fact-check documents. So they can, sift through a big document and they can tell whether something was mischaracterized, miscited. So that's something that the legal tech has been proposing as a way to sort of mitigate hallucinations. I think that the best way is to read carefully and to follow the sources. So the vast majority of chatbots these days provide sources. They provide a link where you can click and see what it's cited. I think Ken was mentioning earlier on that he got an answer where the documents actually that it pointed to did not contain the evidence that was, or the fact that was mentioned in the answer. And so, my view on the topic is that it facilitates so many things. So if the only thing that you have to do is fact check stuff, why don't you do it?
Yeah.
Right? As you can use it for writing, you can use it for drafting, you can use it for brainstorming, you can use it for summarizing, but trust, but verify, right?
Right. Professor, I want to go to you with this question from Arnold, who says, there's speculation that AI will eliminate the need for human beings in other industries. Could this happen in the legal world? Can it eliminate paralegals, law clerks, attorneys, even judges? Could a program put someone in jail or acquit them? I don't think we've given that much authority to these systems, but I mean, Arnold here, the caller, and thank you so much, Arnold, for participating in the conversation, does make a good point that we could eliminate or at least reduce the need for that. And maybe that's not a bad thing because you cut down on fees and process.
Well, it depends if you're the paralegal who's being told that you're out of a job. But, you know, going back to using AI for discovery searches, I mean, when you're talking about massive cases in civil law firms and stuff like that, and you can search discovery and find this evidence by doing what he said earlier, you're going to eliminate paralegals. I mean, it's coming. Because that's a lot of what a paralegal does and other law techs do is gather discovery, put it together, organize it, stuff like that, sift through it. And if you can do that in minutes, yeah, it's going to change the legal profession. There's no doubt about it. It's going to change the way we bill. Again, we're talking about an hourly rate. And there's a thing I believe we're going to get back to or get to what's called value billing, which is I'm just going to bill you for the value of the service. So if you want a will, here's the flat fee for the will, here's how much it's going to cost. Because if you're using artificial intelligence in the way that we're all talking, I love what you said. I think it's a good tool. We just have to make sure that we check and verify it. It's going to change the legal profession.
Could it perhaps, though, Jesse, do you think, democratize some of this in a way or bring down the cost? You know, you brought up the notion of a will. When my husband and I had our children, we went and did a will, and let me tell you, that wasn't cheap. And it was a lot of process, and we hired someone, and they did a great job. But the idea that, oh, maybe AI could have done that for me for a lot less.
Well, it's not just the money part, I think, although that's a factor. You know, just for the Hawaii bar, the number of admittees into the profession is going down over time. Not by a lot, but in a small bar like Hawaii, we've got about 8,300 attorneys active. It's kind of a lot. It's aging. It's an aging bar, so we have less people with expertise in the area. I think the way practice is evolving. You know, you have less paralegals now, less secretaries already without AI. And then, you know, going to the need, there's a definite need for more attorneys, especially in rural areas in the neighbor islands. You know, the court is, the judiciary is experimenting now with allowing attorneys to enter the bar if they're going to practice in certain areas of law without having to take the bar if they meet certain qualifications. So AI can help with some of that, I think, but I would not go as far as to say that it'll replace the entire human part of the practice of law, because it's like a doctor. Do you want a machine? You know, there's some bedside manner you have. It's helping solve intimate problems for people, you know, that deal with losing their rights, getting access to resources, being made whole after a terrible injury. These are things these are people skills, people things.
Right. There's a nuance that he's describing. And what would you say to Arnold here? I don't necessarily know about eliminating judges, but would you trust a program to make a determination on a case?
The more that the work we've done in this area, I sometimes question whether someday AI will replace judges in maybe the more routine cases like traffic and, you know, less controversial cases, traffic court, those kinds of things. But I think that the problem with that, and what Jesse is alluding to, is the human aspect of these legal decisions that we have to make. So many of our decisions come down to, like when a witness is testifying, what is the credibility of that witness? And even to the point where, how does that witness answer questions? What are their facial expressions? How do they sit? And I don't think, at least I hope, I don't think AI could ever replace that kind of judgment. So from that aspect, I don't. It'll change the way law is practiced, but I don't think it can totally take it over. Even in the case of like you were saying, the situation with your will. You know, I don't know if AI can give you all of the, like say you, well, we're gonna leave this percentage to this child, this percentage to just this child because of whatever your reasons are. We see so many fights in the courts over things like wills and wills bequests, saying that, well, that wasn't really their intention, but you know, my sister made like she really cared for her parents when she didn't, and whatever the case may be. So many fights boil down to these kind of human aspects, and I don't know if AI could ever advise you. Well, if you live, you got to be wary of that, because if you leave a certain percentage to this child, another percentage to this child, down the line, they may have a fight about it.
It's true. Those are such complicated conversations.
Right.
But it's interesting that you brought up traffic, because I'm just thinking about, you know, we have red light cameras now that have replaced the officers, and and then you could come to a point where traffic law is adjudicated by AI, and so you never interact with a person at all.
I don't see how any litigation can be dictated by AI because of what the judge is. I mean, you know, the attorneys in there arguing, right? And the clients testifying as to whether or not they thought they violated the law. So I think in litigation, AI is not going to eliminate any, you know, but I do think, to the judge's point, I do think, you know, if you went to tax lawyer or whatever, and you wanted a lawyer to do your taxes or I do think all that, a lot of that's going to could be subject to AI, and people could get laid off. Now, if you wanted to dispute your will, now you're back into litigation with the litigators talking about it. But I can see people saying, hey man, I could save a lot of money going to AI to do my will, my trust or whatever, you know, and hey, if it blows up, then we get into the litigation to where you still have the human factors involved.
Yeah, Mahdi, let's get your...
I agree. I fully agree with Judge Tonaki. I think AI can do a lot of things. We're at a point where AI is not really good with multiple sensors, right? So even with self-driving cars, which we can replicate in a controlled environment, and we can sort of get input from a lot of different sensors to see how the car is going to behave, and we're very, very limited compared to human emotions, right? So at least to me, I'm not a lawyer, but when I see a lawyer or when I talk to my friends who work in the field, I feel like so much of the work they do is about reading the room, right? If you're in a live legal proceeding, you have to see whether your argument is landing with a judge, you have to see whether your client is showing any signs of anxiety, you have to tell whether opposing counsel is, you know, has any tells or reacting the way you want them to react. So I think all of these they require so much, like, being on your toes, ready to pivot based on what you see and feel, and this is not something that an AI can do.
Right, the human intelligence.
And I just have to say something in defense of transactional attorneys.
Man, I wasn't attacking transactional attorneys, man. What do you mean in defense of?
Come on. AI is not going to take over the work of transactional attorneys, I think. Not all of it, some of it, you know, the sort of the code-based type of stuff that is directly, you know, traffic citations, maybe some tax stuff. But negotiating complex transactions, like real property transactions, there are things that happens in those negotiations that I don't know how artificial intelligence is going to pick up on it. There's no way you enter into a formula where, let's just say a buyer and seller of real property. Let's dump it into the AI machine and it'll tell us what the price is, and then we'll shake hands and walk away. There's all kinds of issues, like where's the boundary? I have a neighbor, you know, what are you going to do about that? What are you going to do about that tree over there? You know, it's complicated. So
we still need people.
We still need people.
There's a question here, Judge. Could you take this one from Thelma? It says, when a jury takes a case at the close of testimony in a trial, criminal or civil, sometimes it asks questions for clarification. Can a jury ask for the source of the information presented? Is that allowed? So if AI is the source, could the jury ask for even more granular information, specific areas that the AI searched?
No, generally, once the case goes to a jury, the evidence is how it was presented in court. So they can't, I mean, they could ask a question, can we have more information on that particular piece of evidence, but that'll most likely be denied.
Okay, and there's a question here from Donna that's interesting, Jesse. Who do you sue if AI gets it wrong? I mean, it's an interesting question because would you sue the chatbot? Or would you sue the attorney that presented on your behalf?
Well, that's an interesting question for a transaction attorney.
In defense of a transactional attorney.
Yeah, because whose fault is it really?
Well, these software agreements that you sign, which is basically what an AI agreement would be, it absolves the provider of pretty much all liability. So it would be difficult to hold the software provider or the AI provider liable for that kind of situation. I think the attorney would be responsible if they get it wrong. Yeah.
You deal a lot with criminal cases. Frederick wants to know, in a criminal case, who benefits more from the use of AI, the prosecution or the defense? Can this technology be weaponized? I'm not sure exactly in what way he means, but I would imagine that both sides would benefit equally. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what we've been talking about earlier. I think AI is an extremely useful tool, right, in order to canvass every argument that you want to make. So, like when I just asked him a few minutes ago, what would you put into the search engine? You know, so any question you want to ask about a criminal case, ask it. You know, that's what I'm telling my students, ask it, ask it, ask it. But then you got to go and verify whatever the information is. So I think it's a very powerful tool for the prosecution and the defense. I just think it's a powerful tool for the legal community if utilized right and researched right. Because especially if you're a litigator, right, you have to be creative. And if you got a case where it looks like, you know, your client's coming in, it looks like doomsday, right? You know, you got to come up with some type of creativity. AI allows you to do that. Not every lawyer has a creative mind, but AI allows you to use AI to create different scenarios, different defenses, et cetera. But you still have to verify. So that's a good question. But no, I'm all for AI. I'm just saying it has to be used responsibly. You know, we have to enforce the rules of professional conduct and make sure attorneys are using it responsibly so that the public is protected. To the last question that you asked Jesse, or that the caller asked Jesse was, you know, who do you sue? You sue the lawyer, period, because you're ultimately responsible for the work that you put into a court.
There's a question here. I would love for you to take this one. Do you think there might come a point where attorneys who do not use AI put their clients at a disadvantage, that you haven't left every stone unturned, basically?
Yeah. So when you asked the question earlier on, is AI going to take over and steal the job of attorneys? The thing that came to mind was like, maybe not, or definitely not. But I think the AI, the lawyers who use AI may take over the job of lawyers who don't use AI. So essentially, I think it's a major differentiator. When you have access to such powerful resources, I mean, the technology is moving towards new frontiers. So the things that we're talking about now is having access to, for example, agentic AI, where you have these small little agents that are very specialized and know how to do one thing and do it very well. So essentially, if you're a big, large corporation, you can afford to have the latest technology, and you can afford to have hundreds of these agents doing sort of legal research for you, building an argument for you, building legal theories for you. And if you're a one-person law firm, then you don't have access to these resources. What do you do? And that's a huge question.
Right. So in some ways, we think of this technology as democratizing the process, but what you're saying is that there will still be a hierarchy in terms of who can actually access these tools.
Well, definitely. I think this, when we talked about the companies that, you know, the legal tech companies we talked about earlier on, these are not cheap products. And especially if you want to have access to the more advanced technologies, this is not something that everyone can afford, definitely.
This is a fun one, Professor. Can AI develop a better lie detector for prosecutors, John?
What's the question?
Can AI develop a better lie detector for prosecutors so that, you know, or you know, for either side, I would imagine?
That's his field.
If you can't tell what's hallucinated or not, I doubt it's going to be able to be a good telltale for lying.
That's a good point. I want to get back to, we had started talking about the committee that you're both serving on, talking about sort of a framework for the Supreme Court going forward for the state. What do you expect to come out of that? What are you hoping, Judge, that we get some sort of framework or rules of the road, or what are you expecting from that report?
Yeah, we're hoping that we will provide some guardrails and framework for one thing, the courts employing AI tools, but also for the lawyers and their use of AI in the courts going forward.
These would be recommendations, is that right, Jesse?
Yeah. Well, unless they develop into rules, that's something that's being discussed as well.
Could be possible. Yeah. Okay, Dawn in Kailua wants to know, if AI leads to the loss of paralegals and others involved in researching and helping to devise new legal arguments, is there a danger that it will lead to the legal process becoming stagnant, that essentially it's a loop on its own?
Yeah, that's a general critique of AI. You know, when AI is full of all the information we can provide it, and AI starts relying on AI, the model starts to break down. So that's a concern. Again, I am not one who supports getting rid of all the humans in the legal process. I think it's a human profession that would require human expertise. So use the tool, you know, do better work because of it, but not get rid of it.
Okay.
And I'm not in support of, you know, that either. In defense of me, I'm not in support of eliminating jobs. I'm just saying, you know, when you look at some of these major law firms that just deal in discovery and stuff like that, and a lot of paralegals simply do that, or, you know, I think.
That was actually one of the first areas where AI was used as discovery. Right?
Yeah.
Getting all those documents and figuring out what things are. Yeah.
There's a question here. Lori Ann wants to follow up with you, Judge. Will these rules regarding AI be incorporated into the rules of professional conduct? How often are those updated?
They're not updated very often and very easily because the rules, all of the local court rules have to go through, it has to go to the various committees that deal with those rules, and then they have to be submitted for a public comment. And then the final decision will be made whether to adopt the rule changes. Okay. So the rule changes wouldn't be done immediately, but quite possibly coming out of the committee there might be a recommendation to at least have discussion of changes in the rules.
You know, we've been talking a lot about how lawyers and people within the legal profession use these tools, but I'm interested, Mahdi, if you could talk about just the layperson, because we think about the internet, right, ostensibly it was the great equalizer, right, that we would give the world access to equal information. And so lawyers are, you know, it's a specialty career, and having access to that information, I have to pay for it, you know, hundreds of dollars an hour. Could this help the layperson if you think, do I have a case? Have my rights been violated? Things like that, where maybe I don't need to interact with an attorney to start. Maybe I can have some of that answered and save the money.
Oh, that's a hard question. I think I want to answer with the full caveat that I'm not a lawyer. So I think this is maybe a question for my colleagues. I think from a technological standpoint, you can definitely use these tools to ask very sophisticated questions and get an answer in a way that you can understand. What I worry about is that there are a lot of issues with these tools. So give you an example, I was talking to one of my students very recently, and I was like, you know, there are rules of engagement. You have to know how to prompt, you have to know how to ask the right question, you have to know when you're in an echo chamber. A lot of people don't realize that it has so much information about you that sometimes when you ask for advice or you ask for something, it could repeat something or it could give you something that you're more interested in, right? So we are in an echo chamber. And so you have to be very careful. You have to use it with the greatest care possible. So I was talking to my students and he mentioned, well, why do I have to do all of this? It's just a tool, right? It's not really a tool, it's an assistant, right? And you have to know how to communicate with it, just like you have to understand what ticks off your colleague or understand their psychology. You have to understand how to write the proper prompt to ask your question. And so, yes, it is a great tool, but you need to have the proper education to be able to fully use it and not know when it's giving you the wrong information or not.
Yeah, Jesse, what are your thoughts on that? If you think about an individual who's saying, do I engage with an attorney or do I first start out with ChatGPT or something similar?
I think AI can help, like a judge was saying, in sort of the simpler cases, like traffic citations, maybe some tax stuff that are straightforward code, and but I would be hesitant to fully rely on it and have it, for example, draft a brief for you in a complex case. You might miss things that could impair your rights, and if that's what you're submitting to the court and you're pro se and you're standing behind it, that could decide your fate. And so it depends on the risk and what's involved, and as an individual you're going to have to make that determination for yourself. But I'd be hesitant to going all in on something that's complicated with AI.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Judge.
One thing I'd like to say on that, Yunji, is that in criminal court, it's not a problem because you're entitled to an attorney provided by the state if you can't afford one. But in civil court, every week we see many people who they simply can't afford lawyers. So their house is being foreclosed on, they're maybe going through a divorce, they got landlord-tenant issues, maybe they're being evicted. And this is where artificial intelligence could be of an assistance to these people, because hiring a lawyer, I mean, nothing is a replacement for having a lawyer. And anybody that can get a lawyer really should if they're in one of these situations. But for a lot of people, that's not an option. They can't find a lawyer, they can't afford a lawyer. And if they can at least turn to AI and be advised of what their rights are under these situations and raise that when they come to court, that's where it can be of assistance. Because more and more people are having to represent themselves.
Yeah, that's very
in civil
interesting.
court.
Professor, how are you?
No, I agree totally. Hit the rock, Judge. I mean, really, because we both practice criminal defense, and so a lot of people don't have any money, and so if I am a judge or a litigant and I'm going to court because I'm getting evicted, my house is getting foreclosed, whatever it is, I'm going to court. The issue is, how am I going to court? Is it going to be based on me not really understanding the law, or can I use AI to help me, guide me through this process, right? And so if I found something through AI that may be incorrect, so be it, but at least I'm in the ballpark, right? And so I know that the judge probably gets a whole bunch of pro se cases where a person hasn't used AI, and they may have a good point, but they're not able to express it, and they lose their case, or they may not understand the rules of civil procedure. AI can help with all that. So, it's not about you should go get a lawyer and not use AI. I can't afford a lawyer. I cannot afford a lawyer, and I'm not trying to lose my house. So here I come, you know what I mean? And then you have, people in the criminal system who have already paid for lawyers, paid for appeals, now they're broke, I'd rather have them file stuff in court, at least using AI, than some of the stuff that I'm sure that I see in the Innocence Project, where clients have written their own motions and stuff, and that the judge sees in court.
So, Jesse, perhaps just another legal tool.
Definitely, I don't disagree. But one thing I should add is for folks watching that there are things like legal aid and volunteer legal services. The court has some forms that are easy to use to do certain types of cases. So there are some resources out there. And AI,
no doubt,
AI is another resource.
Yeah,
Too.
no doubt.
And you could also see a system where those entities like legal aid employ AI to boost, because they're bootstrapping it as it is.
Yeah, so long as they check their work. Attorneys have to
Checking
check
their
their
work.
work.
I completely
Mahdi,
agree.
go
I think societies like legal aid could implement tools that use AI in a very constrained way. We talked earlier on about not wanting to use a clever chatbot that gives you answers, that keeps you constrained in what sort of legal arguments to use or legal strategy. I think being able to use AI, this is something we're working with the Hawaii State Judiciary to be able to fill in complete complex forms, or So if these organizations can then build those tools that sort of are specific to use cases they know are of value, I think that's where the value is, rather than using ChatGPT to get a legal argument that may be not necessarily your best way to win your case.
And there's a question here. We're almost out of time, but it's interesting to me that the caller from Palolo says, how does the panel feel about AI in general? And I wonder, Judge, at this point, it doesn't really matter how we feel. It seems like it's here.
Yeah, it's not going to go away, and it's a fast-moving train, and everybody just has to be ready for it because it's changing weekly, if not daily, and it's here to stay, and it's going to be used more and more.
Yeah, I mean, Professor, can the profession keep up?
That's going to be the challenge, right? That's going to be the challenge because, as you said, it's moving, and then you have all these other different platforms, so they're competing with each other. And so one day one may be a little bit more advanced than the other, and it keeps. But I do think our rules of professional conduct cover everything right now. There may be some additions on confidentiality, making sure law firms are trained in AI. I think that's the important, making sure we protect the public from this train that's on the tracks going extremely fast.
And I think we'll have to leave it there. This is a conversation that I'm sure we will revisit. So interesting tonight. Thank you all for being part of tonight's discussion. We do thank our guest, Mahdi Belcaid from the Hawaii Data Science Institute and faculty specialist at UH Law School, Ken Lawson, and Judge John Tonaki and former president of the Hawaii State Bar Association, Jesse Souki. Insights is taking a break for the next 2 weeks, but do join us on October 23rd for a brand new Kako, Hawaii's Town Hall, where we will ask the question, how do we define faith? I'm Yanji Denise for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Until next time, aloha.
Local broadcasts of Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo, and by Carl Smith Ball, providing legal services throughout Hawaii and the Pacific since 1857, making a positive difference in the communities where we live and work.